I'll let you in on a little secret. Reaching your revenue goal won't change your life, but hitting your profit goal, that absolutely will. If you want to build a life first business this year, you need to create more margin, both in your finances and in your schedule. If you're ready to double down on profit generating strategies that actually work so you can work 4-day weeks, go on real vacations, or even take the summers off, you won't want to miss this. In my free masterclass, Double Your Profit While Working Less, you'll learn exactly how to set your business up to scale so you can give yourself a raise, create a clear plan for how to work that dream schedule, and step into your CEO era, the one where you and your business aren't just surviving, but thriving. You can grab this free masterclass at www.jadeboyd.co/Double Your Profit Masterclass or go to the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
I think we're often so afraid that if we don't do all the things and we don't buy all the things or invest in all the things, that we won't be successful. But we're kind of missing this piece of, is the way you're running your business sustainable?
Welcome to the Business Minimalist Podcast, a podcast about redefining productivity for the modern woman in business and finding ways to work smarter, not harder, in business and life. I'm your host, Jade Boyd. I'm an MBA business minimalist and productivity coach who helps overwhelmed business owners simplify and scale their service-based businesses with strategy and systems. On this podcast, we'll explore simple ways to earn more while working less. If you're ready to scale your business, bring order to chaos, ditch the busy work, and make space for what really matters, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Business Minimalist Podcast. Welcome to the show, Val.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm super excited for this conversation. I feel like this might be the first time that we've actually talked one-on-one before. We've known each other for a while, but the first time that I met Val was at the Empower Her conference, or I didn't meet you. I came to know of you and you were on a panel discussion, and the way that you answered all of the questions, I was like, I think her and I have a lot of the same beliefs and philosophies when it comes to running a business. And so I think that we see eye to eye on a lot of things, and I'm really excited to dive into profit first because it is one of those things that creatives especially, but many business owners in general just think is really complicated and overwhelming, but you're here to simplify it for us, which will be really good. So starting off, can you tell us just a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I actually started as a wedding photographer. I started my business in college and really just over the course of about 7 years, learned everything the hard way, like pretty much everything. So I did everything wrong with finances and time management, all the things. And so over that time, I just, kind of out of necessity had to learn how to take control of my money and do the things that I couldn't afford to outsource. And so I built just kind of systems and processes around what I was learning, and Profit First was one of those main things. And so as I pivoted into coaching, because that really was more of where my skills and my passion lied, I started to talk a little bit more about Profit First and was very nervous about that because it, like I said, it did not come to me naturally. And I never would have thought that would be my main focus in coaching, but really found that there was just this hole in the creative industry where people don't feel like finances are approachable and they don't feel like they can ask their accountants and their bookkeepers questions. And so I was seeing a need for someone to kind of bridge that gap. And it was also just naturally happening with my clients. We were going there. And so I almost, I guess a year and a half ago, was like, all right, I'm going all in. We're doing finances and see where it goes.
And how long ago has that been now?
So the finance part, or
pivoting into coaching?
Okay, so coaching has been 6 years, but then niching down to finances has been about a year and a half.
Okay. I always think it's interesting to look at the timeline for that because I think a lot of business owners do struggle, like you said, of like, what is my niche going to be? And I never thought that it would be this, but then it kind of just naturally happens over time. And so I did want to point out from like a time perspective that sometimes it does take a little bit of time to find that clarity. And you're so obviously meant to be in the space that you're in, and you're so good at teaching finances, specifically like sharing your story of how you came to know numbers yourself, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I wanted to point that out to start. But talking about profit first, I feel like a lot of business owners maybe have heard of it or are generally aware of what it is. But in case somebody's listening, they're like, what do you mean profit first? What is this? Do you want to give a little bit of a background on what that is?
Yeah, totally. So it is essentially a way of managing your cash, like a cash flow management system. And it is based on percentages. So you set about 4 main percentages for most people, and you're just separating your money out into these different categories or buckets. Some people like to think of it in buckets or envelopes. So it allows you to make sure that you are prioritizing all of the important things in your business. So paying yourself, which a lot of creatives don't do, and profiting. So those 2 things, especially, we tend to think that's something that hopefully will happen someday. But actually, this turns that on its head and says, no, we're going to decide that that's going to happen today. It's not something we hope for or wait until the end of the year for our tax accountant to tell us. No, we decide to make ourselves profitable and to pay ourselves first.
So a common objection, I would say, to profit first is that, oh my gosh, it's so complicated. There's so many bank accounts. This is so confusing. But you actually say that profit first can simplify your finances. So tell me more about how that works and how it can actually simplify things rather than make things more complicated.
Yeah. So I think a lot of where that question often comes from is probably just not fully understanding the process, which is like most things. Typically, when we don't have a lot of exposure to something, we tend to assume, we just make a lot of assumptions.
Yep.
And especially the bank accounts, there's something about the bank accounts that people feel like it's so complicated or overkill, but it's actually quite simple to open a bank account in most cases. And we think it's going to be this like 10-hour project, but you go into your bank if it's local and it takes maybe an hour. Definitely not an hour to set up one new bank account. But I do think that there's validity there of like, it's just not the norm. And it's not what we typically see. And even bankers, like you will encounter some banks who are like, why are you doing this? You shouldn't be doing this, because they just don't understand. They don't know the purpose behind it. But I think what really simplifies it is that you're not having to do extra math when you look at your bank account. So the whole idea behind the bank accounts is actually not to change our behavior, but to like cater to our natural behavior. And what do we do when we're trying to make a decision with money? We open our bank account. We see how much is in there. But the problem, especially with creatives, and I would say for me especially, I almost never calculate correctly in my head. So if I'm looking at one bank account, I'm like, that's a lot of money.
Yep.
Like, I for sure should be able to buy that lens or go to that retreat. And the problem is, we're like self-identifying finances are hard for us. We're not typically super great at math. But then we're making it harder for ourselves by having it all together in this lump sum and not knowing what that money is for. So I think it simplifies decision-making, and it also simplifies just knowing what you should be doing with your money. So you have a process. There's like clear steps of you make this money, you separate it into these accounts, and you're good.
Yep.
Obviously, there's some other like details in there, but it's more of the front end that is getting it set up that, it takes a little bit of work, but I think that work is so worth it for the clarity that comes on the other side.
So the idea is that you set up these different bank accounts, and then every month you're calculating those percentages and saying like, okay, this amount goes to my profit account. This amount goes to the account that I pay myself out of, tax savings. And then what was the fourth one?
Business, like operating expenses.
Oh, expenses. Okay. And then you can check your bank account at any time and know if I want to go to that retreat, there's this amount of money in my expenses account, and therefore I can't afford it, or I cannot afford it. But overall, you're prioritizing paying yourself. And I love what you said about deciding, like ultimately you do have to decide. It's not going to magically happen. You have to decide,
Yeah.
this is the way I'm going to run my business, and this is what I'm going to
Mhm.
prioritize. And
Mhm.
that's one of like the key characteristics that I would say of a business minimalist, because I do think it's so easy as a business owner. We make so many decisions, and it's easy to
Mhm.
fall into like the default behaviors that we have, or the
Yeah.
default ways of doing things without being intentional. And
Mhm.
you also mentioned overspending and like reinvesting in your business. Like, it's really easy to say like, oh yeah, I have enough money for this
Mhm.
retreat and this lens. And I do
Mhm.
think that's a really common thing, especially for like first and second year business owners. So
Mhm.
why should creatives, especially at the beginning of their business, prioritize paying themselves over reinvesting in their business? Because I think it can seem like the better way to spend money if you are quote unquote reinvesting it, but it can also be a
Mhm.
trap. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, totally. So I think one of the easiest ways to think about it is we're wanting to set our business up for success, right? We're wanting to build healthy habits and put structure in place that is going to serve us well in the long run. We want our business to keep going, right? Nobody builds a business expecting it to fail. And so I think we're often so afraid that if we don't do all the things and we don't buy all the things or invest in all the things, that we won't be successful. But we're kind of missing this piece of, is the way you're running your business sustainable? Is it something you can keep doing year over year? And a lot of people, it's a side hustle at the start. And so for a lot of them, it's, how do I quit my job? How do I start paying myself? And the reason that's so hard is because they haven't been doing it at all. They've just, all the money goes back into the business. And so we've built this business that needs more cash to survive than we can actually afford if we want to go full time in our
Mm-hmm.
business and get paid. So, and it's not about not reinvesting at all. I think that those first years, reinvesting in the business is important, but with guardrails. And that's really what the percentages provide. They give us guardrails and they help us to get more intentional about our spending, because sometimes this is kind of a hard truth, but I think we're trying to buy ourselves out of our problems sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's so much education out there that most of it, is actually good education and good things to learn. But it's almost like we're trying to take the shortcut. But, there aren't really that many shortcuts in
Mm-hmm.
business that actually work.
Right.
And there are some people who have these, crazy stories of like an overnight success or whatever. That's, we all know it's not actually overnight, but we need to stop looking at those stories as the norm or the goal and just look at what is in front of us and how can I be creative in problem solving and even just getting innovative. This is something
Mm-hmm.
I've talked about a little bit before with people, how I think we forget that a big part of being an entrepreneur is innovating. And if we can just buy ourselves out of everything, we're not innovating at all. We're just,
Mm-hmm.
doing this thing that promises something that may or may not happen.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, it just aligns with everything that you're about, with being intentional about what you're doing with your time, what you're doing with your money. And when we have that, the framework and the structure of profit first, it helps us to do that without needing to be an expert in all those things.
I love what you said about almost like bootstrapping makes you more efficient with your money. And I can see so many parallels between time and money. And I have seen
Mhm.
that with so many of my clients, and even in my own experience, especially in my first couple of years of business, especially as a photographer in my first couple of years, because there's no limit to the amount of equipment that you could like
No.
need to make yourself better, right? But if you have like 2 days a week to work, like you'll find a way to fit the important things in, and you'll get really creative and innovative on how to spend that time. And same thing with
Mhm.
money too. If you put limits on how much you can spend on X, Y, and Z, you're going to make better decisions about what you
Mhm.
actually really need to invest in, because there's lots of things that are
Right.
good. Like you said, this is a good
Yeah.
investment, but is it really the best investment that I could possibly make?
Mhm.
And forcing yourself with a little bit of like boundaries and limitations does help with that
Mhm.
decision-making process.
And I think another side to that is having something that you really want to spend money on and then connecting that to the work it's going to take to afford it.
Mhm.
I think helps us to see more clearly really what we're spending because it's not just, it's not just the dollar amount.
Mhm.
And even on the positive side of, okay, I want to do this retreat. So I'm going to work really hard to book X, Y, and Z to make that happen. And there's just I think there's so much more reward in that.
Yeah, that delayed gratification and
Mhm.
even stepping into that role as a business owner where you do feel like you understand the way that your finances work. I've seen that being so transformational. A lot of my clients will say, I finally feel like a quote unquote real business owner because when you do really
Yes.
understand and start making decisions differently, you do step into like a different like identity and a different view of yourself as a business owner too. So I see
Yeah.
so many benefits there. And for you
Mhm.
and your clients, that's something that they struggle with. They identify with, I'm the creative person. And there's so many
Yep.
messages telling us just stay in your zone of genius and outsource everything else and only do what you're best
Mhm.
at. But there has to be
Yeah.
this balance between being the creative person, but also having that general understanding of your finances. So, how do you help your
Yeah.
clients kind of balance those two roles in their business?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I think the first most important thing is I'm trying to shift the mindset that being right brained means I'm not capable of
Mm,
XYZ, knowing my numbers, managing my time, all these things. And I think that we've kind of put ourselves in this very limited box and it kind of becomes, I mean, it really does become an excuse and something we're leaning on to not do the hard work. And I say that as like, that was me. I just I was intimidated by it and I didn't want to look stupid. And I just kind of adopted this like helpless persona around
mhm.
money and numbers. And even to the extent of, I would say, like in my normal day to day life, I would like mini golfing. I'd be like, Mark, my husband, you just keep track for me. I'm not going to do the math. I don't want to do it.
I can't. It's a number.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we have a lot of like limiting beliefs on ourselves as creatives. And I think that the biggest thing I want anyone to take away from any sort of interaction with me is that you're capable. You
Mhm.
are capable. It may not be your primary gifting. It may not be super fun at first or maybe ever, but you are capable. Your brain actually is capable of understanding it and getting it under control. And the freedom that comes on the other side of that is so worth that work. And it is so empowering. And I think that's honestly one of my favorite parts is just watching people, like you were saying, like start to like, you almost like stand a little straighter, like, wow,
Mhm.
I can do this. I can actually be a real business owner. And you don't have to love numbers. You don't have to love bookkeeping. That's one thing. Bookkeeping, taxes, like, hey, as soon as you can outsource that, great. But those don't fix this problem. Like
Mhm.
those on their own don't actually give you a plan for your cash and a way for you to really manage your money in general. So I think that mindset shift is the most important first thing, just to believe that you're capable.
Yeah, I love that you differentiated understanding your numbers from knowing how to do bookkeeping or trying to be your own CPA because they are
Yes.
completely different. And I feel
Yep.
like I came into business ownership with an advantage because I had gotten my business degree and my MBA. And so most of what we were trained to do is like to read financial reports and make decisions, right? So I had a very clear understanding of numbers, but bookkeeping,
Mhm.
still very hard, very different
Yeah.
skill set. So outsourcing that is still
Yeah.
good for me and any business owner if you understand what your numbers are. But as long as you
Yeah.
can read your reports and understand the line by line what's happening in your business and use that
Mhm.
information to make good decisions moving forward, like that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about understanding
Mhm.
tax regulations or anything like that.
Right.
Still ask somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll even say, just to help like maybe settle any fears even after that, is you also don't have to know how to read financial reports to do profit first. Like you can totally have this process in place and not feel confident reading a profit and loss. I'll just be totally transparent. I still don't really, I also haven't really tried because it's just not necessary with the way that like I manage everything with profit first. So if that's a fear, like, oh my gosh, I have to know how to read, like you can grow into that, you
Hmm.
know?
For sure. As long as you know like percentages, this is how much money I made, percent, you can
Mhm.
do like a multiplication problem,
Yes.
then you're good.
Yes. Yes.
So you mentioned
Exactly.
limiting beliefs around money and what we're capable of. And I just want you to speak a little bit more into your own money mindset and the
Mhm.
journey that you've went on personally throughout your business and changing like your own relationship with money. How has that changed over time from the time you've started your business to where you are now?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think what I already mentioned for one is just the intimidation and helplessness around money. I would avoid it. I would lean on that, like just my personality as being a reason that I couldn't or wouldn't do that or understand that. And so I think that was definitely a big shift of like, oh, I actually can do this. I can figure it out. But then another one is maybe a little less common. I think I actually grew up with more of an abundance mindset. My dad is a business owner and worked really hard, and he actually would often be would remember hearing him like worried about their sales, and then the end of the year we'd be like, yeah, you were worried and nothing, like you were totally fine, right?
Right.
Like it was a joke in our family. And in general, he was very successful. By the time I was born, there wasn't a lot of the like scraping by that my older brothers experienced. But two things from that, I definitely correlated hard work and like just having what you need. So I think I took that too far, actually, though, and would sometimes just spend being like, well, I'll figure it out.
Hmm.
And like, I'll be able to, make the money that I need,
Right.
or that was even a part of not having a full plan for my numbers or sticking to a budget was like, just, I'm going to figure it out. It's going to be
Right. It's
fine. And
always
so
worked
I've
out.
had to. Yes, yes. Well, it actually hasn't, but you know, so we still tell ourselves that I'm fine.
Yep.
So I really had to temper that. Like we typically think of an abundance mindset as being the correct mindset. Like that's what we hear a
Mm,
lot. Coaches are always like, you need to have an abundance mindset, blah, blah, blah. But I think there has to be a middle ground. And I think we need to ground our abundance mindset in the hard data and the actual numbers and connect it, like I was saying before, connect what it's going to take, what I need to do to have this financial outcome.
mhm.
And so I tell people a lot, we need to know when enough is enough. I need to know what that number is, like the quantity of clients or the quantity of sales in order to be able to pay myself this and cover these expenses. And so I needed to have the abundance mindset, but with data to back it up and to bring those
Mhm.
together.
I love that you made that connection and your story about like your parents and growing up. I can relate to a lot of that. And I think getting married, you get it's eye opening for a lot of your beliefs and like
Yes.
things that you just think are true when you see how different your spouse is. And for my
Hmm.
husband, his family grew up, his dad was a pastor, his mom was a stay at home mom for most of his upbringing. And so they didn't have a lot of
Hmm.
money, but they did a lot of hard work
Yeah.
and were very responsible with their finances. And so Caleb has this
Hmm.
amazing abundance mindset, but also a lot of discipline when it comes to money. And
Yeah.
me, I have more of
Yeah.
like a scarcity mindset.
Mm.
And I love that you connected like the abundance mindset doesn't just come when you think, oh, everything is great and there will always be enough, because
Yeah.
that can actually lead to real scarcity and not abundance if you're not
Hmm.
doing the hard work that actually
Hmm.
provides that security for yourself. And so I love
Yeah.
that distinction and it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, yeah. And it is funny how we often tend to marry people who are different. My husband grew up with very little money. And so it's been like a process of him learning to have more abundance mindset and tempering mine. So, yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely grow from these things.
Yeah. I also think it's really interesting personally with my business versus personal finances. I have completely different mentalities. as a business
Yeah.
owner, business finances do not stress me out. I feel like I understand it. I know what I'm doing and it feels
Mhm.
good. But then when we talk
Mhm.
about like life insurance and health insurance and like any of the personal finance stuff, it just stresses
Yeah.
me out so
Yeah.
much. And so I need to do some of my own digging into my money mindset. But yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like as a business owner, you're just constantly pushed to personally develop yourself. You're confronted with all of your
Oh,
stuff.
oh yeah. I was recently telling a friend that, yeah, I think the thing that has like grown me the most in my life, in all of life, is having a business.
Yep, for sure. Because it'll show you
Yep.
every like messy part of your mindset, no matter what area that is. But I feel like
Mhm.
money is definitely a big one. So
Mhm.
I also really want to dig into, along with planning financially, it allows you to do some really cool things in your business. And as a business owner,
Mhm.
you were able to take 2 maternity leaves in 2 years. And as someone who's obviously personally planning for maternity leave this year, I
Yeah.
would love to hear your advice.
Yeah.
And even if you have like steps for the process or check boxes that you went through
Mm.
when planning for maternity leave,
Mhm.
I think a lot of service providers think I'm just not going to make any money when I go on maternity leave. My business is just going to stop. And if I want to take 8 weeks off, that
Mhm.
means that my business stops. And that doesn't have to be the case, especially when it comes to
Mhm.
paying yourself. So I would love for you to
Yeah.
share your experience there.
Yeah. So, really, I think one of the first great clear check boxes, whether you are planning on having a baby soon or not, or even just want to take time off, is to learn, like to know what your essentially what your minimum is that you want to have in your salary account. So if you adopt the profit first method, you will have a salary bank account. And just to clarify, you actually don't pay yourself the full percentage of whatever you make that month. You put that percentage into a separate account, but you pay yourself a set amount. So your paycheck every month remains the same whether your income fluctuates. And that's how you're able to pay yourself year round if you have seasonal work. So that's kind of a starting point. But then, so I recommend that people pay themselves less than they could initially to build that bank account up. And I have a rule in my business that I always have as close as possible to 3 months of my salary saved at all times. So that stays in that bank account. So that's why I was able to do two in 2 years, because I was not planning on the second year. She was a surprise baby. I mean, yes, I had, the 9 months to figure it out. But because of that process, when I came back from the first maternity leave, I was using that up, using up the reserves that I had
Hmm.
created. But then I continued, instead of giving myself more of a raise, I continued paying myself at the same level so that I could build it up again.
Hmm.
And I did in that time have to get a little bit creative with like what work I took on. And I did a little bit of extra work because it was so fast to build that up again. But I knew I needed to do that because I knew how much money I needed to make in order to pay myself that amount. So I look at the full year. I have this spreadsheet that I call the annual estimator, and it breaks down your income into the 4 categories and shows you this is how much you'll make in each of these categories if you book these things. So you like list
Hmm.
out your offerings and you put in quantities and you like play with it to get it to where you want it to be. So I look at that spreadsheet and I say, okay, I need to make this much in salary for the full year. And I think I can handle capacity wise this many clients per month, or, whatever your process is, your offerings are. And I take a month off every year by using this process. I continue to know I need to book this much in order to pay myself for this many months and to cover these expenses. But in my brain, those quantities are not including that month or that 3 month stretch. And so it's seeing it all laid out. I think looking at a full year at a time can be initially a little bit overwhelming, but the clarity that brings of like, okay,
Yeah.
I have to book this many clients per month or per quarter, per year, whatever your seasons are. And when you know that, you know exactly what you're shooting for, that directs your marketing. This is one thing that I think people don't realize. knowing your numbers directly impacts your marketing because
Yeah.
you know what you need to be marketing and when. So yeah, it really comes back to just that plan of having the reserves in that account and looking at the full year and what it will take in order for you to be able to take that time off. And I did completely take the time off. I did not like do blogging or emailing. I set up autoresponders. And I think actually my first maternity leave, I did have guest bloggers. The second one, I was like, nah,
We're
just can't.
done.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I had a baby and I was going to have another baby. Like I literally had two babies at once. So it's just, you do what you can.
So how many months apart are your kids?
14.
14. Very close.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
that's fun though.
So, I mean, yeah.
They will be
it's
maybe
wild.
someday.
Yes. It's actually really sweet now because they're so close in age that they play really well together. And so we're in this stage of life where we're like, okay, like all of that hard work was worth it. And now they just go downstairs and play for a while and don't even ask us for anything. It's like, wow.
This is magical. And we didn't plan this, but it worked out.
Yes. Yes.
I love how you talked about the system and like going back to this isn't making things more complicated. It's actually simplifying things. I love what you said about finding clarity in your numbers because I have all of my clients go through a similar exercise. Like I said, we see eye to eye on a lot of things. And I do think that it's so hard to make good decisions as a business owner without seeing those numbers out front. And oftentimes, I'm sure you see this with your clients too. They'll go through that exercise and realize like, wow, I am dramatically underpaying myself, or wow, I don't actually have the capacity to reach my financial goals the way I'm pricing my services right now, or the way that my systems are working right now. And without looking at your numbers, you can go years just like hoping, oh, more clients, that's going to solve my problem. I just need more marketing, more clients, and then it's all going to work out someday. But that's not the case. And so finding that clarity in your numbers is such a crucial step for building, like you said, quote unquote successful is different for everybody, but sustainable means paying yourself. And that doesn't happen from the revenue numbers, which are easy to estimate. It comes from profit and how much you're paying yourself.
Yeah. And even when you said that, I just was thinking about how we often think very black and white about investments of like, okay, if I want to buy this thing, I just need to book this thing that's the same amount. But actually, that's not true. You have to book quite a bit more than that amount, because there's only a certain amount from that income that goes toward expenses. And whether or not you're doing profit first, like you still have to pay taxes and you're still going to have other expenses like overhead expenses that, are going to take some of that money. And so things aren't a one-to-one. And so this is a really good mindset shift for that when you're making decisions.
Yeah, 100%. I also would love you to speak into running your business in 2 days a week. From a systems perspective, we haven't even gotten to this part, but you're also very passionate about systems and boundaries and automations and workflows and all of those things as well. And you do run your business now in 2 days a week. So I would love to see like a little peek behind the curtains into what your time looks like as a photographer and a coach now. So two different types of services that you're providing, and being like the business owner and having those hats on. What does your schedule look like and how are you able to do that?
Yeah, so this has definitely evolved a lot, and I think I'm even still tweaking here and there, and I think that's a part of managing your time is learning as you go.
Yeah.
But I've definitely found one really big helpful change that I made was getting intentional about when I took calls. So I only take calls with clients in the afternoons. And a part of that initially, when I had very small babies and very little energy, was okay, am I going to push through the afternoon sleepies to do my own work or to be on a call? Only to be on a call. Like I show up. Like if I'm on a call, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to be there. But I am not going to write a blog post at 3 p.m. on a day that I'm very tired.
Yes.
And everyone's different with that, but it's a part of knowing yourself, So that was one big thing that I changed. So now I pretty much do all of my work in the morning. And so 8 to 9 is when I'm kind of finishing getting ready for the day. I spend some time reading my Bible and journaling to just kind of like get my head in the right place. And then starting at 9, that's when I really start working. And this is kind of a mix of content creation, marketing, admin work. And I actually spend very little time in my finances. Like it's really like once a month that time is including finance work. And so really more of my time these days is the content creation and marketing. And I do prioritize a lunch break because I think that that's really important. Like we need to have a brain break. My goal is an hour, which might feel crazy when you only have 2 days.
Yeah.
But I've just found that I do so much better if I have that full hour and I'm really giving my brain a break. So then another just kind of funny little thing that I've done is, so like a call like this, like a podcast interview, I try to only do those either right at 9, so right when I start, or my last block of the morning, so like 11. So if it's just one call, then I try to do it on the ends so that I have a longer chunk of time to work. Because when you're breaking it up, it's hard to like stay in like focus and flow. And so I don't take random calls at like 10 a.m. So today was funny. This call doesn't really matter, but it's around 10:30. And the reason I did that was because I had a call before this that was also a podcast interview. And so I was booking them back to back. So I'm really, really intentional about those decisions to maximize my work time because it's so small. Like if you think about my calls are taking up almost my full afternoon most of the time, that means I only have like 6 hours in a week to run my business.
Which again, just paints the picture of you show up really, really well in your marketing. Anybody who follows you, or if you go follow Val after this, you have really great marketing and it's high quality. It makes sense. It looks beautiful. And 6 hours a week, I think that's just a testament of giving yourself that limitation. And if you only have 6 hours, you'll find a way to make it happen.
Yeah. And that definitely means saying no to a lot of things and taking a lot of things off my plate. And I don't even have that. I'm not doing that much outsourcing. I have a podcast producer and that's it right now. So I have in the past done like some social media outsourcing and things like that. But I've had to get so intentional about what I spend my money on and what I spend my time on. And so I'm constantly thinking about those two things. Like, is this the return on this investment really going to give me more time? And then the other piece of that too, so even the podcast producer, I made that decision because I knew I wasn't going to be able to like push myself to stick to the deadlines without someone waiting on me. And so it was not only an investment financially to like just get things off my plate, but it was accountability because I know that that's something I struggle with. Whereas before, like about a year ago, I was paying someone to be creating content for me, but I had to like post it. And that meant, I had to edit it. And we've talked about being perfectionist. And so that wasn't working for me because it was falling on me at the end and then I wasn't doing it. So like when you have such limited hours, you have to like be really aware of yourself and just the way that you're functioning and try to build processes around that. So yeah, it's a lot.
I was just speaking with a past client about this a few days ago because she had a season where a lot of things in her life got turned upside down and she had very limited time to do her launch and was just like cutting corners left and right and still had a really great launch. And so we were just talking about sometimes it's surprising what you can get away with as a business owner when you're not being a perfectionist because you don't have time to be a perfectionist, and how little actually matters and how much we're just adding to our to-do list because we want to do it and not necessarily because we have to do it. And that limitation can really help you cut the clutter really quickly. When you have, like I do right now, I have unlimited amount of time. I work about 4 days a week, but it feels very spacious to me. And
Yeah.
I'm allowed to fit some of those things on my to-do list that I know are not
Yeah.
going to happen later on. But
Mhm.
yeah, cutting your
Mhm.
time, it gives me hope when I hear business owners like you operating with that schedule, because I can see
Yeah.
many ways for myself. My goal is also to cut down to 2 days a week after baby girl comes this summer. And yeah, just getting myself mentally prepared to stop being a perfectionist even more so.
Yeah. And I think that something that really helps with that is having your boundaries clearly communicated.
Mm,
So, I mean, even like you've experienced my autoresponder email and I even say, I know these things are annoying. I'm sorry for that, but you need to know. Like you need to know you're not going to hear from me right away. And there are definitely, especially with the response time, that's something that like I am wanting to try to find a way to get quicker at. But because I'm communicating it, I don't sit and feel guilty about it, you know?
mhm.
And it's okay if people don't want to work with me because of that. Like I have to let that roll off and,
Yeah.
trust that I'm going to get the work that I need. But it definitely, you're more confident in those boundaries when they're public.
Yep. And it can be very uncomfortable to set those boundaries for sure, especially if you're a people pleaser. But ultimately, like you said, if people are not willing to respect your boundaries, they're probably not the best clients to be working with anyway, because that's a red flag
Yep.
for other things that might come down the line too.
Hmm.
So,
Yep.
this has been such a good conversation. Are you up for a bonus round of a few bonus
Yeah.
questions? Okay.
Yeah.
First question is, what is your favorite productivity hack as a business owner?
My favorite is having a weekly priority list. So,
Mm,
not looking at your full to do list and not only looking at your today to do list, but knowing and looking at a full week at a time. That was really pivotal for me to not, because I can zone in on today and forget what's happening tomorrow and
right.
not be prepared for it. And planning for the whole week at a time has been really helpful.
Okay, follow up. This is an extra bonus question I wasn't planning to ask, but what is your planning stack? Do you have a weekly planner where you map things out so you can see them, or do you use like ClickUp or a calendar, a mix?
So I have my master lists digital. So those are right now, I just am using Apple reminders, but I'm in the process of transitioning to ClickUp.
Yay, so
And
excited for you.
so, yes. So those, like my full everything ever lives in this one app. So that's a big thing, one app. And then what I've actually just started trying because I was getting distracted by the digital, like all of the things digitally, I've started to do like just today, I did get a planner. And so I just write out what I already had planned digitally in my today planner so that I'm not navigating. Like I'm so distractible that if I have to navigate to a different app on my computer, I will inevitably go to something like
Yep.
social media or whatever.
Hmm.
So I'm just looking at a physical planner right now to see if that will help with that. And I guess in between those two steps is time blocking on Google Calendar. So I take
Okay.
the weekly priority list, put it into Google Calendar time blocks, and then I have my today stuff on the planner.
Okay. In case you didn't know, you can do that in ClickUp. When you have your tasks for the day, you can drag them into the calendar within ClickUp so you can time block
Nice.
in the app.
Ooh.
But I also do something similar with I love paper planners. I'm just a paper gal, so I don't know how I would run my business without ClickUp because there's just so much to keep track of. And
Yeah.
especially with the podcast workflow, there's like 35 tasks that are done for every podcast. And there's no way I wouldn't be
Yeah.
able to do that every week
Yeah.
just from memory. But it is really
Yeah.
helpful to look at my to-do list and then prioritize from a time blocking standpoint on paper so that I have
Mm.
the like 5 minute check of like, okay, what's most important? Let's just not
Yeah.
continue to look at this list and pick out the easy things, which I would totally do.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
Okay. Next question is, what is your favorite finance or money mindset book to recommend to business owners?
Well, it's probably pretty obvious. Profit first.
Yep. I was wondering if you would say that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's honestly, I haven't even read a whole lot of others because that has been so effective. And, 6 hours a week, I got to
Yep. One stop shop. I love
prioritize.
it.
Yes. Yes.
And then last thing is, where can listeners find you after the show?
So I hang out mostly on Instagram. So if you actually want to like be friends. I do respond to my DMs. I am the type of person that I love that. I love when you will just talk to me because I'm a normal human. And so Val_Marlene_creative. And then all of the ways to work with me are usually linked through there on the link in bio, but valmarlene.com is where you'll find how to apply for one-on-one or do my course or get freebies, all the things.
Are there any specific freebies that you would recommend people start with?
Yes. So I have a very short and simple 3-page PDF that is salary made simple. So it's how you can start paying yourself and build up that 3-month emergency fund in the process.
Perfect. And we will make sure to link all of those in the show notes. So thanks so much again, Val. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, I had so much fun.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the Business Minimalist Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you'd rate and review it on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening today. Your rating and review will help more small business owners discover helpful episodes each week. And don't forget to check out the show notes for the tools and resources mentioned in today's episode, because good ideas don't grow businesses, action does. And if you want more business minimalist tips and resources, head on over to Instagram and follow me at jadeboyd.co. I'd love to hear what you took away from today's episode. I'll see you next time on the Business Minimalist Podcast. The number of women burning out is at an all-time high right now, and I'm on a mission to change that. If you're a service provider who's feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid, don't let another year go by staying stuck. The Business Edit is a 12-month group coaching program that helps you declutter your business from top to bottom so that you can have shorter to-do lists, a clear strategy to scale, and know exactly what to focus on each week to drive results in your business. You'll end the year with the business that you've been dreaming of building, one that gives you your life back and pays you more than you ever made before. In the program, you'll follow my signature 5-step method for scaling your service-based business. You'll get business minimalist strategy, marketing, systems, and productivity roadmaps that are simple to understand and easy to implement. Plus, 12 months of customized one-on-one coaching to help you every step of the way. Join me inside the Business Edit at www.jadeboyd.co/coaching and get my step-by-step blueprint with everything you need to build your dream business in 2024. Now back to the show.